This is Africa News Network, First Fast Live with myself, Cindy Mabi. Good to have you and good evening. The Johannesburg Magistrates Court has barred the media from broadcasting some proceedings of the Karabo Mokoena murder trial, and this has sparked debate over the merits of televising such cases. The magistrate is only allowing broadcasts of the bail ruling. The defence argued against filming of proceedings to ensure a fair trial for their client, and the state further held that filming should be barred in order to protect key witnesses. The 27-year-old suspect, Sandile Mantswe, allegedly killed and burnt his girlfriend, Karabo Mokoena, in April. Mantswe is charged with 2 counts of murder and defeating the ends of justice for trying to conceal the evidence. The suspect reportedly confessed to killing Mokoena, and the court postponed the bail hearing to the 9th of June. The Mokoena ruling evidently ignores a precedent set by the Western Cape High Court. In granting permission to live stream the Van Breda trial, the High Court judge says there was no evidence to support the state's claim that broadcasts would adversely affect witness testimonies. And this is in stark contrast to the state in the Karabo Mokoena trial, which argues that barring the media was necessary to protect key witnesses. And in the Van Breda trial, Judge Siraj Desai says it's not easily ascertainable how broadcasting would compromise the accused's fair trial rights. However, in the Mokoena case, the defense argues that a trial by media will be unfair to their client. And granting Van Breda live streaming, Judge Desai held that his order could easily be varied if there's any hint of fair trial rights being compromised. But in the Mokoena trial, the magistrate agreed that televising the bail application would be detrimental as crucial evidence will be revealed.
Well, we're here basically because we believe that the case here today is a matter of public interest, and we're here to show our support to the family and to show solidarity and to basically state that we've had enough of these kinds of incidents because they've been recurring in South Africa for a long time and nothing has been done. And this is a matter of public interest, and we just want to show support to the family. I think it's completely unacceptable, to be honest with you, because as I said, we may be the only political party here, but this is a matter of public interest. Everybody is interested in this case, and certainly the public has to have confidence in the justice system. Now, what happens, for example, I hope it doesn't happen, but for example, if he gets bail and the public weren't able to view the proceedings themselves, then there's going to be complete outrage then. So we think it's completely unacceptable.
And joining us live in studio is Nora Okonkwo, legal expert. Dr. Anthony Townsend is a clinical psychologist. Gershua Brooks is communications coordinator at the South African Human Rights Commission. And Penny Mjali is a social media specialist. And Makgotso Lingane is an attorney with Weber and Wenzel. Good evening to all of you, and thanks so much for joining us. Let's just talk about the media or public interest and where one needs to draw the line in terms of what is a need-to-know basis vis-a-vis the rights of the bereaved family and what impact that has. I'll start with you, Dr. Townsend.
Well, I suppose when we look at camera coverage of any court proceeding, it is somewhat of a double-edged sword with its own complications, its own benefits and its own problems. To begin with, if we look at the fact that it can potentially create costs, we have to be aware of the fact that, as has been raised, there's a possibility of the fact that witnesses might be wishing to kind of recant their testimonies, not want to engage in the process for fear of public scrutiny, because this can add to an already stressful experience. At the same time, the fear is that witnesses might be influenced by televised footage of what's going on in the trial, which might distort it and hamper the process. But at the same time, we also recognize that in a matter such as this, there is a huge amount of public interest, and we do often see that there is a right for the public to know certain elements of this. And of course, we can see that this could be helpful to many aspects of the trial, and of course increase sort of public belief in the validity of the trial and the trial proceedings.
Yeah. But
it has both.
Yeah, but the telecasting that we've seen, if you think of the Reeva Steenkamp case and now the Van Breda case, has largely been brought by media houses for their own appetite, I suppose, for coverage and content. At which point is the family consulted? And how are their rights infringed on from a human rights point of view, Gershua?
Well, on a rights basis, I mean, there's a couple of rights that one needs to look at here, but I think, you know, at the front of it, dignity and privacy comes to the fore. But the issue is, and this is what came up in the Oscar Pistorius case initially, was the issue that a court proceeding is a public event in any event. And one has to see the presence of cameras, and I think that was the judgment, or that was the decision that was made in the Pistorius matter, is that it's merely an extension of the public gallery. Because you, Cindy, myself, anyone here present can walk into any particular court case and sit and watch those proceedings, unless, of course, you are a material witness, and you shouldn't be seeing aspects of that case because it might influence your testimony. So, in other words, anyone should be able to access a courtroom in this. So, those rights are therefore limited to a certain degree, and therefore it shouldn't necessarily be a rights issue.
Yeah, but isn't a precedent by law setting the tone for a decision another court will take, Mr. Okonkwo, in what we've seen in previous cases as cited?
Yeah, you look at O.J. Simpson's case, basically televised matters have been widely between the U.S., we started in 1994, and currently Oscar Pistorius matter versus the state and Van Vrede. The point for me is that in as much as you can set a precedent, another sitting magistrate could have a different opinion and come to a different conclusion. However, in every matter, this is just the first stage. Whatever he arrives at can be overturned at a higher court. The issue of public interest not being allowed because of the media interference, I don't agree with that. I feel that this case has a lot to do with public scrutiny. It will show transparency from all the key players, from the defense to the state, from the magistrate. So people need to see how transparent the proceedings are and come into a conclusion.
Okay, let's get a perspective from social media and how that can impact, especially the court of public opinion. Once a court has been, or rather proceedings have been broadcast, Penny Mjale is a social media specialist. Just your view on how this could unfairly prejudice the client, or rather the accused, when it's televised. What's your view?
Well, in my view, social media is a very open platform, so it's a place for everyone to put in their opinions and say what they need to say. In the case of the court proceedings, yes, it can turn out a bit negative because obviously people can say certain things that may implicate certain matters, the things that they're not supposed to say, or cause maybe other people to maybe start attacking certain people that they're not supposed to be attacking. But at the end of the day, I think this case is so big and it's so controversial at the moment that people actually need to understand what is going on. And yes, social media will have a positive impact on it. It may have a slight negative impact on it, but at the end of the day, what is the ruling, what is going to come out at the end is the most important thing. And that's going to be what people will be talking about, tweeting about, and speaking about on all social media platforms.
Yeah, Makgotso Lingane is an attorney with Weber Wenzel. Good evening to you and thanks for joining us. Just from the defense side, saying that this will prejudice their client, we may not agree with it, but this is a right that they have in court. Do you agree with it?
Hi, Cindy. Hi to the viewers. You know what? I think it's interesting. So this case has gripped the nation since its inception, and it involves matters that need to be discussed by the society at large. And there has to be seen to be justice, open justice. Justice must be seen to operate. And I think that the broadcast facilitates that. One thing that's important to note, however, is that the difference between this case against Sandile Mantwi and, for example, the Van Vrede trial is that the criminal investigation is still being conducted in this instance. And so I think that the particular argument expressed by the state was that the media being allowed to broadcast proceedings runs the risk of prejudicing the very investigation, whereas where the investigation has already been compiled and finalized and it is now a matter of prosecution, it is quite different. And so I think that the cases are distinguishable in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. No, I understand that you don't want to compromise the case, and especially if sensitive information might be leaked, so to speak, from the live broadcast. But the justice for the victim and the family as well. I don't know if the broadcast, we heard from Reva Steenkamp's father when explicit pictures were shown of her gruesome murder. That it's something that even perpetuates the pain further. So should we argue for or against live broadcast based on the fact of the impact it has on the families?
I think one of the aspects of this is, of course, taking into account the potential effects on the family members, and of course they are consulted in this right. I think conscientious consultation with them can help, but at the same time we also have to be aware of the fact that our hope is that by broadcasting these sorts of proceedings, we're not just going to perpetuate trauma, but we might also help facilitate healing. Of course, as the wider public, we're exposed to all of the horrific events that can occur, and seldom do we get the same coverage of how they might be amended through through just outcomes.
Yeah, and why in recent years have we seen a more vigorous appetite from media houses and wanting to get access to what traditionally would be just a physical interaction as opposed to having cameras there?
I think there's two things that I just want to talk to. That aspect of whether it's in the public interest or whether the public just finds it interesting. I mean, it's an interesting question. It's something that we obviously have to look at. But I mean, in the first issue of the photos that you mentioned that were shown in open court, I mean, that was part of the evidence that was being led. That was going to happen anyway. So Riva's parents, whether there were TV cameras there or not, would have most likely sat in that court and were going to be exposed to that form of evidence being led, in this instance by the prosecution. And I think that that's something that can't go away. I think also we should be cognizant of the fact that the Steenkamp, not the Steenkamp, but the Pastorius case, the state versus Pastorius, gave us very good precedence in that you saw Judge Masipa having to make it up as we went along, saying, for example, that when this evidence is being led, we're not going to have the cameras focus in on that. So I think that we have to keep in mind. But of course, the difficulty with this case is that I think any court proceeding is always going to be seen as being in the public interest, to be a public event. However, there is that element that does come into play where the public finds it interesting and therefore we follow it. But this case here, I think one can't just say that it's interesting for the public. It's very important because it deals with gender-based violence and femicide. So I think it's an important case.
Would that extend, Mr. Okonkwo, the whole, I suppose, difficulty that the country is facing with regard to gender-based violence in creating awareness? Are these the positive spin-offs that could come out of a live broadcast, albeit a difficult case?
Well, it's going to get to that extent in the sense that there will be emotional outbursts, there will be a lot of negative feedback if televised publicly. However, at the end of the day, whether you televise it publicly or you don't, the court will definitely come to a conclusion which will be made public. Okay, so the issue, like he made mention of this, in terms of a gender crisis issue, for me, the court being televised will not resolve that either way. I think what will put an end to this is what Britain has done, basically. Britain has made a declaration their courtrooms are no-go areas for camera. So that stays like this. But for the flexibility of the democratical dispensation of both South Africa and the US, under Californian law that O.J. Simpson was tried in 1994, O.J. Simpson versus the state, it was televised. And people saw the benefit of that. Okay. And even when you look at Michael Jackson murder trial, okay, it was televised. People saw also the benefit of that. It's all about coming to a conclusion of orientation in these issues. Whether it's going to compromise, it will not compromise material witness or otherwise. The procedures will definitely still be the same, and the conclusion can be challenged at a higher court.
Yeah, but how does that then impact the witnesses' deposition if they, the media or trial by media somehow ends up influencing what witnesses give in their testimony? Is there enough evidence that potential live broadcasts could influence witnesses?
But that was the same thing that was said in the Oscar Pistorius matter about witnesses. And even when the witnesses were put on stand, we never saw that influence. Yes, so it's all about presumptions, speculations, okay? The one we have watched, even the McVreda matter, I haven't seen where the witnesses has been shown to be unduly exerted influence. You know, what I will really say is that in the Oscar matter, I feel he himself, okay, was much more ridiculed, as could have not been if it was not televised, to the other way of a witness being influenced unnecessarily.
Okay, let's take a caller. Ramsey in Cape Town. Good evening to you.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you.
What's your question or comment?
Yeah, my question is, I don't really understand what the difference between me going there to the court and watching on the TV. Yeah. Because it's the same person who go to the court and choose not to go to the court and watch on the TV if it's broadcasting. So I really don't know what can affect the case if one chooses to go to the court and sit on the TV.
Thanks so much, Ramsey, for that. I think we concur, even on social media, the fact that it is an extension of a live event, that it would have had a public conclusion anyway. But Makgotso, I know we tend to refer to the Oscar trial because somehow we all became legal experts by one way or the other. What was it? The one for Dolus Eventualis. Thank you. So do you think that this is also healthy in how we not only are educated in terms of your rights or the proceedings in court, but to deal with the larger conversation around gender violence?
I think it's incredibly healthy, and I think that we should promote it. We should promote the broadcast of these criminal matters. It serves to educate the public, but it also speaks to the principle of open justice and the public seeing justice happening. I think it's important to take note of the fact that while there may be sensitive information in affidavits, as was the argument advanced in this particular instance, that information can be redacted, and so it's not a good enough reason, rather, to put a blanket ban on the broadcast of what happens in court. It can't work that way.
Yeah.
I think that the courts should take a stance that is flexible and that allows for the protection of minors and witnesses who prefer not to be broadcast, but there cannot be a blanket ban that is allowed to stand.
Yeah, Penny, just from a social media point of view, where the concern from the state is that witnesses could potentially be vilified or victimized even further. We know that the whole universe of social media can be quite brutal in that sense. Do you think this is something that we should consider?
Yes, it is true. It can be quite brutal, and unfortunately, it's one of the problems that we face when it comes to a network or a media platform that can be so wide. Yes, it can be quite negative. I think maybe if possible, when broadcasting or when tweeting, people should be sensitive in what they say. I think also it comes to user responsibility about what they put online. But at the end of the day, once again, it is such a big case. It is a controversial case, and it also has caused a lot of awareness for us as people. And I think that people actually should know, yes, the key witnesses could be in trouble. If possible, we can just restrict it as much as we can according to the witness names, maybe, and things like that. But at the end of the day, we will know who those witnesses are, and at the end of the day, we will know what the outcome of the court case was.
Yeah, and Dr. Townsend, just the social psyche, once all of this has become in the public domain and we deliberate or discuss, what does it in any way impact society in an adversely negative way, or is it more about understanding matters and trying to grapple with them?
Essentially, retrospective analyses on looking at public broadcasts of trial proceedings have actually revealed that they don't often cause adverse effects. More often than not, they encourage active participation from the public in trying to open up conversations around such issues. And most importantly, when these trial proceedings are found to have what is perceived as a just outcome by the majority of the citizenry, we actually find that most people feel reassured that as much as there's trauma occurring, there is also a possibility for safety and security being imposed by the state.
Mpumi, you're calling us from Katlehong. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Good evening to your viewers as well. Okay, I'd just like to share my story. I think the problem really is not what is really happening, but it's the stigma that is attached to everything. Because as a woman, when you undergo this thing, there's actually a stigma that you undergo from people. You get attacked by people. It's like you are the one who welcomed this monster into your life. You are to blame. You should have seen. And it's not always the case. Even if you go to police to report a case, I've been failed dismally by police. I was in an abusive relationship for like 16 years. 11 years I remained married. I ran away, and only last year I find out, after 5 years of separation, that he's hired a hitman to kill me. I've tried. I went to the court to report. They told me that I have to get the address. I told them I don't have the address. They said, no, they can't help you. I told them that my life, when I leave here, I might be killed. Nobody cared. I went to police, and they couldn't help me. So what does one do?
Yeah, Mpumi, is the case resolved, or are you still in the situation where your life is potentially threatened?
I'm in hiding. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. It's a third hitman now that is looking for me.
All right, Mpumi, can I just ask you to give your details to our producers, and we'll follow up with that. And I realize that you're not able to hear the callers, but the last caller, and thanks for sharing, essentially saying she tried the justice system, it's failed, reporting the matter, getting a restraining order. Now there is a hit on her by an estranged husband. So even that, I mean, I don't even know what to say in this case. So maybe you can give us some guidance in terms of rights and where you go to elevate the case.
I think that's the concern for the South African Human Rights Commission, actually. The issue of how do we protect women's rights in this space, and that we need to do better. I will take you back to the murder, the horrific murder, mutilation and rape of Anine Booysen from 5 years ago. And at that stage, we had a Minister of Justice telling us that we're going to roll out 52 sexual offences courts. The key question is, how far are we in that process? How far are we in how the police treat the survivors of gender-based violence and femicide, and women that do go ahead and report domestic violence and so forth. So that is, for me and for the Commission, actually the important issue to deal with when it comes to the rights issue. In as much as we're dealing with this issue, and why I think it would be important to put this particular matter on the public forum, is simply because it also gives an opportunity for people to see what the consequences are. Whatever the verdict is doesn't really matter, but what the legal process is and how rigorous the legal process is in these cases to act as a deterrent. Because a lot of people say bring back the death penalty, chemical castration. That's not the solution. This here is the solution, to show what happens when you get caught.
Yeah, and Mr. Okonkwo, just in terms of dignity in death, the one caller citing the fact that you'd be scrutinized as a woman, your lifestyle, and almost being condemned that you brought this upon yourself. How does the live broadcast of it deal with that particular issue of stigma or stigmatization?
There is a saying that if you want peace, you go to war. So if I am a female, am I going to say that my rights has been indignified or infringed upon, I should keep quiet? That doesn't solve the problem. Okay, like he said, the law courts for me provide an ambience for justice to be obtained. Okay, now the question for me would be, what justice are we patting out? Now, in a criminal matter such as this, where he's facing the 2-count charges of murder, defeating the end of justice, maximum sentence is 15 years, he can get to life. However, in the case of Oscar Pistorius, for me, the ruling was a bit ridiculous. Okay, he's supposed to get 15 years. He walks away with plus or minus a slap on the wrist. So I will look at it from this way to ensure deterrence, okay? In the sense that we should look at the offenses, penalties that result from this, to make sure I'm not going for a death penalty. I'm not going for execution, no. But if we could make it that if you commit these offenses and you are found or penalized, you wouldn't see sunlight again. You stay there forever. Then maybe people will have a rethink about the course of action. Because why must you kill someone? You're destroying life you can't create. For me, it's not only barbaric, and at times people cite psychological evaluation for this, but these people know what they're doing. If I look at that young man on the screen, he's sound, perfectly okay. So it's something that should, at least, I believe that what the public coverage could do to this is to serve as a deterrence for other intending offenders.
And Makgotso, as from also a legal point of view, the case around the fact that your dirty linen is essentially hung out for all to scrutinize, and pointing the finger that the woman perpetuates the crime because she puts herself in a place where she's dependent or she enjoys some of the material gains from a relationship. Just advise to Mpumi Akola as to where does one go if you feel the legal system itself has failed you? So
there are a number of avenues that Mpumi can explore. My advice would be for her to go to a police station or to see Power, organizations such as Power to assist with her, to assist her. I think that, look, it's important that issues like this get aired out in public, because broadcasts educate the public about the workings of courts and understanding of, and can foster an understanding of why courts has decided in a particular way, which then speaks to the credibility of the justice system. I think that the societal sort of tendency to put the blame on a woman is less a legal issue and more a societal one that we need to that we need to have an open dialogue about, because the fact of the matter is that women are afraid to speak out because they find that they will be victimized or they will be shamed for having enjoyed the benefits that they did receive from this abusive relationship, and that's where we get victim blaming and so forth. And so that is a larger conversation that we need to have about why it is that our first sort of point of call is to victim blame, instead of focusing on the fact that a crime has been perpetuated and that women are dying in this country at 5 times the global average.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks indeed to all our guests for coming through this evening. We had Mr. Nwara Okonkwa, legal expert, Dr. Anthony Townsend, clinical psychologist, and Gershua Brooks, communications coordinator at the South African Human Rights Commission, Penny Mjali, social media specialist, and Makhozo Lingane, attorney with Weber Wenzel. We take a quick ad break to stay with ANN7 Prime.